but we will still say in English, I missed the bus, because we will place the blame on ourselves. But Arabic speakers will never place the blame on themselves, even if it really is their fault. So Cherry, don't make me laugh. So even if they really are the ones that caused the bus, to not be able to take the bus, if they had, maybe they were late going to the bus stop, or they chatted with a friend or something and they didn't make it, but they would still say in Arabic, the bus missed me. Because that places the blame on the bus and the bus driver, not on themselves. So they always, in their language, they will place the blame on others for things that go wrong. But in English, we like to, in the cultures where English is spoken, we like to take the blame. By the way, you guys better take notes. I guess Shujiao will take those up. Okay? So you better take some notes. So as you see, like I said, in English we can place the blame on ourselves, but in Arabic they won't. So just by looking at the language that they use, we can learn something about that culture, right? We can learn something that, wow, in Arabic they will never place the blame on themselves. And wow, in Navajo, they don't believe that you can force someone or something else to do something for you. So just by looking at the language, we can tell something about the culture. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is, I think a lot of us know that we can look at things like idioms, legends, proverbs, myths, and even religion to learn something about a culture. For example, we can look at, I guess everybody knows the idiom, like, things like, don't cry over spilled milk, or time is money, or what else? Oh, the early bird catches the worm, right? So we look at these kind of idioms and things like that, and we can tell, oh, what does the culture where these idioms were developed, what do they value, right? What does this culture value? Just by looking at the idioms they use. And look at their religion, proverbs, myths, whatever. But actually, there are other things that you can look at, which the most important thing is, if you have a look at daily, you can barely see that, daily communicative interactions. You can tell more about a culture than even looking at these things. As you can see in the graphic, I've made it shown that it covers a much wider area. And what I mean by that, I mean just like two strangers interacting, a person buying something at the supermarket, the way people, the language they use or the way they behave non-verbally between a boss and a coworker, those kind of daily contact and daily communication is what really you can look at to really learn something about a culture. And that's what I think that we need to focus more on in our language classes. Because I think it's easy for us to pull out something about religion or teach some phrases or some vocabulary or some idiom to our students, but is that really communicative? Can that really teach our students to use the language in a culturally appropriate way? Not really. We need to focus more on those like daily communicative interactions. So how do those phrases or those words we use, or how does these interactions or the way what we will ask someone, how does it start? Okay, so in a culture, what will happen is you have things that are paid attention to in the culture, and that's what's valued in the culture, right? And then it just keeps going around. People keep talking about these things, whatever is valued. We have the same vocabulary. And then something will happen in that culture, something significant. And when that significant thing happens, then it will be given a name. And then a new vocabulary word will be invented, or like, for example, if there's a new invention, like if we invent a telephone, we have to have a new vocabulary word for a telephone, right? There was no word before. Or if there's some kind of tragic event, like 911, okay, that's something that happens. So now when you hear 911, those numbers, you already have a cultural meaning. You have something in your mind. You have background knowledge. What does that mean? Before that event happened, before that significant event happened, you heard the words 911 and you didn't really think much about it. But now it has a totally different meaning because something significant happened. So then it will also be given a name, right? It will be given a name, and then it will be incorporated back into the culture and back into all of the vocabulary and the phrases and everything in that culture. It will just keep recycling itself until something else significant happens, and then the process will just continue on. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Just like, for example, let's say, I know sometimes you will say, you will ask the person in Chinese if you have eaten yet, and it's a kind of greeting, right? So that means something significant happened within Chinese culture, within Chinese-speaking people's culture, in order for this phrase to start to become used as a form of greeting. And that was a famine. There wasn't enough food for a while, so people started asking, have you eaten, every time they would see someone new. So that was a significant event. So then something was altered. We got a new way to say hello. And then that was incorporated back into the culture. And now it's part of the whole culture. Even though now, in the modern time, in Taiwan, of course, everybody can eat. Hopefully, mostly everyone can eat if they want to. So they can find some rice, but it's still circulating in the culture, right? Until something new or something more significant will occur. All right? Another way our language is influenced by culture is through the number of vocabulary words we have to describe certain things. For example, there's an area in Arizona in the United States, which is a desert area. And actually in this area there are many different kinds of desert regions. But in English we only have 7 different words to describe those desert regions. But in Paitui, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, but from the research I found in Paitui's language, it's another Native American language. They have 17 different words to describe desert regions. Like, for example, in English, of course, we can say a small sandy hill at the top of a cliff. But in their language, they have one word that can say all of those English words into one word. And the reason they have these words is because that area is particular to their culture. And they may use some areas for farming, some areas for housing, some areas for storage. So the different types of desert areas are very important to this culture. So because it's important to the culture, new words are invented. Just like before. Something happened, maybe they needed, just like the diagram I showed you before, maybe something happened, they needed somewhere maybe they started to raise some kind of animal. They needed somewhere to find this, to raise the animal. So they searched for the perfect kind of area. And then when that area was discovered, that's significant in that culture, and it was given a name. And then that word is incorporated back into their body of language that they can use within their society. And that's why there's so many words. But for native speakers of English, well, it's not so important. Desert areas is not as important to us, so we have less words to use to describe them. All right, and so all of this research about the relationship between language, thought, culture, behavior was given a name. Have you guys heard of this before? Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Have you guys taken any language and culture class? Yeah, you heard about it before? Okay, good. So anyway, there's 2. At least we got one person that remembers. Okay, so we have a weak version and a strong version. And the only difference basically is, for you to know is, well, the weak version says some things about the language are influenced by culture, and the strong version says everything is influenced by culture. I just think you need to know this word because this hypothesis is very important. If you get nothing else from your language and culture, you can look up this hypothesis later. I don't have time to talk about it today. I just wanted to show it to you. But anyway, this study of the relationship between language and culture started leading people to ask some questions. And those questions were, which was first, the language patterns or the cultural norms? So that means, which came first? Have you ever heard the phrase, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Have you heard this? So which came first, the cultural norms or was it the language? So did something happen kind of in the culture, you know, that brought about our language that we speak today? Or do we have the language first and then the culture came? You know, how is it related? What affects what? And also about is there a relationship between language and culture? Well, I think you guys can already see from the little I've told you that there is, right? And it's a reciprocal relationship. Because we have words already that we know in our culture. Sometimes we use the words we already know to describe new cultural events, right? We combine words to describe new events. And then when those new events happen, of course, that's culturally related and the new word is invented. Sometimes it's a totally new word, but sometimes we take what we already know from our culture in order to invent those new words. So, you know, it's all related and interchanging and mingling with each other. So now I want to talk a little bit about some specific ways in which you can see how language and culture are related, and especially lexically, you know, words, vocabulary words. And I'll look at lexical components, lexical classifications, universal processes, talking about colors, and focal meanings and prototypes. So if you don't know what any of those are, good, because I'm going to tell you. And I won't waste my time. The first one is lexical components. You can look at how many vocabulary words are in a language that can describing a certain object, just like I told you about the semi-desert regions, and that can tell you how much that culture values that object, okay? So take, for example, horse, okay? If you notice here in the diagram that I've made, we have different words in English to describe male and female pre-adult horses and male and female adult horses. And we have a special name for baby horses. All these different names. And because we have a different name for every different type of horse at a different stage of life, one can make the assumption that, oh, in English-speaking cultures, they value the horse, okay? But let's look at the otter, okay? Here you see otter is called otter no matter if it's a baby otter or an old otter, you know? So you can make the assumption, wow, it's not called different things. So in English-speaking cultures, the otter is not valued, okay? Does everyone know what an otter is?
水獭
水獭. So otter, okay, so we don't value the otter in America. Because if we did, we would have more words to describe the animal, okay? Here's another example, and this is with kinship terms. And what I mean by kinship terms is those terms we use to describe the people we're related to. Now, in English, our mother's sister is called aunt, and also our father's sister is called aunt. And our mother's brothers are called uncle, and our father's brothers are called uncle. But if I look at another Native American language, Iroquoian, I probably pronounced that wrong, language, you can see that the mother's sisters are also called mother. So they call their mother mother, and they call their mother's sister's mother. Okay? Understand? Hold on, I will tell you later. So, and then, but you notice though, the father's sister though is still called aunt. Okay? So there's, but the mother's brother is called uncle. But look, the father's brother is called father. So, we can make the assumption that in this culture then, that the children then of the mother, the real mother, the birth mother, and then the mother's sisters, that child will call all of, you know, his aunts, right, mother, and he will call his mother mother. So that lets us know that in that culture, then the mother's sisters will have some authority over those children, right? Unlike in American culture where it's aunt. So that means that that child, in their culture, they don't believe they have one mother. They have many mothers. So that means that, for example, in that culture, then let's say in that culture that the mother's responsibility is to teach the children some basic things like take care of, I don't know, how to wash themselves, how to feed themselves, or do something like that. So that means not only the mother is in charge, but the mother's sisters also has to help teach these children those things. And that means also that all of those mothers can punish that child, right? And maybe the father is in charge of punishment. But that means the father and also the father's brothers also will have the responsibility of doing whatever is the fatherly duties of that culture, So you can tell just by examining these kind of kinship terms, what are the relationships and what is their cultural, their family cultural background. Got it? So interesting. And you can contrast it with your own culture. I don't even talk about Chinese. There's so many different kinship terms. Oh, it's too complicated for me. I just asked my friends before, what's your uncle's name? Uncle. I don't know what his name is. I never called him anything but uncle. You don't know his name? No, I just call him uncle. Okay, so lexical classifications. Also, there's a lot of other things that I'm not going to talk about today, which you can look at, like how language is culturally determined. Like, some languages have like masculine, feminine, or neutered. Some divide languages by animate and inanimate objects. Sometimes it's semantic meanings, and sometimes it's shape and culture. I think in Mandarin, words are separated by shape and culture. Right? Do you know? Right? Because you have a lot of what do you call it? Number words, to go with certain kinds of shaped objects. Like 三张邮票, right? 张, okay, so because everything that's kind of paper is 张, right? Okay, so it's shape and texture. You separate, you categorize things by shape and texture. Okay, and also I thought this one was really interesting, so I want to share that about color terms. They did an experiment where they gave people from 98 different languages these little tiles, these little pieces of tile that had different colors on them. And there were 329 different tiles. That's a typo. That should be Japanese, not Javanese. But anyway, I forgot to change it. And anyway, so they gave them 329 different tiles. And they were all shades of color. And they asked them, oh, can you just look at these tiles and put them in different groups, depending on what color they are. And you decide how many groups that you think there should be. And some languages only had 2 groups, and they separated things between black and white. So for example, they may think that this color is white, and they may consider this color here black. Maybe they would consider anything dark black and anything a light color white in their culture. And then some had 3, some had 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way to 11. Like you can see, Mandarin has, the Mandarin speakers always wanted to categorize those tiles into 6 groups. And I don't remember about English, how many English did. But a lot of these languages that are mentioned here a lot of them are African languages. But I thought, one thing that I thought was really, really interesting was with, what was it, what language is that? Let me see if I wrote it down. Russian, yeah, Russian language was really interesting because Russians don't just have a color for blue. They have 2 categories for blue, light blue and blue. they think they are totally different. Like, and when they put them into the groups, the Russians would always separate the blues into two separate groups of blue. One was light blue and one was dark blue. But they just didn't consider both of them to be blue. Yeah, I thought, wow, that's really interesting, and it is somehow related to their culture. I don't know, it makes me want to do some research, to read something about Russian culture, why blue is so influential. Also, they did an experiment with speakers of Mandarin and English, and we're talking about focal meaning or prototypes. And that's like, for example, if you say, like if I'm talking to a non-native speaker of English, and I say, oh, I saw a bird, okay? Okay, I see a bird, the most typical bird, or the prototype bird in my mind. But the bird the bird I see in my mind is not the bird that the non-native speaker has, because their culture influences them on what is the most typical bird, or what is the most typical sandwich, or what is the most typical desk, because of their culture and how it has influenced language. Even though we're speaking the same language, and I'm saying in English, bird, and they're hearing bird in English, what they have in their mind is still not culturally correct. What they're seeing in their mind is the Mandarin equivalent of bird, the Taiwanese cultural equivalent of what is a bird. So this experiment, they had different language groups pick from pictures. What do you think is the most typical sandwich? Or what do you think is the most typical whatever? And they were very different. So that means we cannot just teach someone, oh, this is sandwich, this is bird, this is box. We have to teach them, when we teach them a different language, we have to tell them, this is an American box, this is an American sandwich, or whatever. You have to teach them what is culturally appropriate, what is the same. The thing, this is one thing, here's one example. Like in the United States, we don't have a chicken burger. There's no such thing as a chicken burger. Doesn't exist. We have a chicken sandwich, but there's no such thing as a chicken burger. Because only meat from a cow ground up and made into a patty can be a hamburger, can be a burger. Everything else is a sandwich, right? So you use the language inappropriately when you say chicken burger, because there is no such thing as a chicken burger. So you have to be sure that you teach the students not only the language, but the culturally appropriate language to use. Also, this goes even further with you guys know communicative competence, right? Right? Oh God, I hope so. Are you awake? You know what I mean by the term communicative competence? That means, okay, well, one person knows. It's enough for me. As long as one knows, then I can keep going. So what I mean by communicative competence is being able to use the language communicatively in order to communicate with another person, and to not only know the language, but use it correctly and appropriately in different situations. So when we get into situations where we're talking to different people, we carry a lot of background knowledge of different interactions. And if we don't have this background knowledge of the target culture, then it's hard for us to be able to communicate with people appropriately without saying something that is maybe inappropriate or maybe hurtful, something like that. So it's really important that we somehow build up our students' background knowledge on different cultural elements, so that when they encounter certain situations of talk, they'll be able to understand what is appropriate in those situations and what we can say, how we can say those things. For example, if you were going to talk to someone about the World Series, then you would have to not only know what is the World Series, but you'd have to have all the background knowledge about past World Series games in order to be able to carry on a conversation about this topic. Otherwise, if you don't have the background knowledge, then the conversation is going to end, or you won't know what's going on. Also, just for example, if someone says, you guys have surely heard this before, if you say to someone in English, a native speaker, "How are you?" and the other person says back, and they're a non-native speaker, if they don't say fine or okay or what is expected, if they say, I feel really bad and I got a lot of trouble and things are going bad, the native speaker is just like, oh my God, who is this weirdo, Because it's inappropriate. Because how are you is not asking, right, how are you? It's asking for, please acknowledge you see me here. I see your body standing there. I want to say, I see your body. So I say, hello, how are you? But I don't want you to tell me how you are. I want you to acknowledge me and say, you see my body standing near you. So I want you to say, fine. And then it's just acknowledge each other. It's not asking for anything else. Another example is with the terms Native Americans. Actually, I've used that term several times, but I don't know what is appropriate. Because we have so many different words for Native Americans. Should we call them Native Americans? Should we call them the original Americans? Or should we use Aborigines? But sometimes Aborigines is used only to refer to the people of Australia, the Maori people. So what is appropriate? Can we call them Native American? Can we call them Indians? But then we got confused because there is Indians, and then, or should we say American Indians? But isn't Indian a bad way to say, because they were called Indians because Christopher Columbus thought he landed in India? So it's very confusing, right? So it's our job as language teachers to research these kind of things and not just say, oh, I'm call them American Indians or Native Americans. You got to be careful that what you teach your kids, because then they may go to the States or some other place and then they offend someone, right? And another example is with boy, even the words boy and girl. It's sometimes African Americans they don't like to be called boy or girl because of their past history, past cultural history. When they didn't have equal rights in the United States, sometimes when they were, even after slavery was abolished, they were, sometimes people would be derogatory toward them and call them, hey boy or girl, because it was just like, you are black, you are faceless, you are nameless, you don't have a name. So sometimes in certain settings, to call a black person or African American boy or girl is very derogatory. So it's responsible for us as language teachers, not just to teach the language, but also teach when it's appropriate and what is appropriate to say. Because maybe we can call a white person, hey boy or girl, but we can't call a black person. So we have to know what is culturally appropriate. Another, with the background knowledge, we have so many ways in English to say big, but sometimes we use them only for certain things. Like we can say big, large, supersized, jumbo, family size, extra large. The list can go on and on. I can tell you so many different ways to say big, but only some of those ways are used with certain things. Like some of them are only used with products you use to clean your clothes or to clean your house, and others are used with food or food items or drinks, that kind of thing. So depending on the object, like you don't want to call someone jumbo. You don't want to describe a person as being jumbo. You may get killed or something. But what I mean is you couldn't go to maybe the supermarket and say, can I have a supersized laundry detergent? They would just look at you like, what are you talking about? So you can't just teach the words. You have to teach when they're appropriate to be used and for what things they can be described. And I have a few examples to give you of when students or non-native speakers and native speakers have interacted and they hadn't been taught what is appropriate. And then the non-native speaker leaves the situation either hurt or, confused. So we have A and B person, right? And A is a non-native speaker. and B is a native speaker of English. And A says, hello. And B says, oh, hi. And A says, oh, what is wrong? You look so down. And then B says, I just found out that my grandmother died. And B says, oh, that's okay. So, A is like, that's, and then B begins to cry, right? So, I mean, it's grammatically correct, right? You can say that, but situationally, communicatively, it's incorrect. Because the person, A just wanted to be able to make the person feel better, So she said, oh, that's okay, but it's not okay, my grandmother is dead, So she would need to have been taught, oh, in this kind of situation, maybe if someone said, oh, I lost my, my book or something, oh, it's okay, maybe that would be appropriate. But when someone dies, you can't say, oh, it's okay. You need to say other things, but the person didn't know. And I have another example. So A and B meet, and A is non-native speaker, and B is native speaker. So A is going to give B a gift. Okay, so A says, hi, Judy. Hey, here, I saw this yesterday and bought it for you. It reminded me of you. And B says, you shouldn't have done that. And then at this point, A looks very confused because, she does not understand that B's answer is a polite way of saying thank you, right? So A leaves confused and hurt because she thinks the gift has been rejected, right? Because she said, oh, you shouldn't have done that. Shouldn't have, why? She's so confused, right? But, we laugh at it right now, but, sometimes it happens if we just assume, oh, those students will just pick it up by themselves, or they should just automatically know that, but it doesn't always happen. And I have another example I just thought of is from where I got my master's degree, there was a girl came from China, and she went to buy something at Walmart. Walmart is like Carrefour in Taiwan. And then when she paid for the stuff, and she was walking away, the cashier just saw her and waved and said, bye, and she said, y'all come back now. You all come back now. And so the Chinese girl turned around and she came back. Because the lady said, come back now. Come back now. So she came back and she said, yes. And the lady said, the cashier said, what is it? And she said, you said to come back. And the lady said, yeah, come back. Come back. But she's saying bye, And the girl said, I'm here. The Chinese girl said, I'm here. And the lady said, what do you want? And he said, you told me to come back. And he said, no, come back in the future. Come back. So they're so confused, Because the phrase is, come back now, You all come back now, and it sounds like you come back right now. So if you don't teach students, different phrases are used in different cultural situations, they will be very confused. Okay, 下课10分钟.